Thank you very much. That was the show reel from our awards show last year. One of the things that we do, and I'll talk about in a second, is organise the Brit Awards. And that was Brit Awards 2017. Thank you very much for... Actually, when I watch those, I always think of the things that went wrong that you don't see. And there was some houses dancing in part of that for Katy Perry. And one of them fell off the side of the stage, sort of a house went sideways. But, so thank you very much for inviting me over here. It's an absolute pleasure, and it's great to meet you all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a bit about what the BPI does. You have a very similar organisation here with some slight differences, as always. And I'll talk a bit about the British music market, I'll talk a bit about international, and then maybe we'll tee up the next conversation. We've already had a bit of a discussion about the issues around digital copyright, and I think that is, of course, a very live issue in politics at the moment. So, we are the trade body for UK record labels, the recorded music industry. I'll say a little bit more about the other organisations in a minute, but we represent more than 420 independent labels and the three major record labels, the Globals, Universal, Sony and Warner Music. And we were founded in 1973 to, as we say, promote and protect British music. And we cover about 85% of all the music sold in the UK, all the music produced, I suppose it's fair to say. And there is another organisation that's kind of a co-organisation that looks after some of the indie members, but we are kind of the largest chunk of the market. This will give a quick overview of it's the people that work for the BPI, but it gives you an overview of what our functions are. We have my function, which is public affairs. We have a communications function. We do a lot of research, market analysis, and I'm going to draw on a lot of that in a minute as we go through it all. We have a director for independence and international, and they're doing two things. One is member services internally in the UK, but also trying to bring those companies to market in developing and growth markets and help them get a foothold, focusing on the independent sector. And then we have quite a big legal affairs operation, content protection unit, that is looking after the sound recordings for all of our members. And we have a kind of entertainment and events and charities wing as well. It's a kind of slightly odd being a trade association. I always say that I could be doing this for trains or any supermarkets, and all the basic skills of the job would be the same. I'm talking to government, I'm looking at select committee reports, the dealings of Parliament, the European Parliament, but I'm doing it for the music industry in a company that has a very large television show attached to it. So it's a slightly odd mix for someone in my profession, but obviously it's fantastic for me to do it, and like a lot of people in the BPI, I'm a failed musician myself, so it's a good home for me. Although I did a couple of TV shows last year, which I'm very which I'll tell you about a lot if you allow me to. So where do we fit in? We are part of a kind of wider music ecology. We are one of a number of organisations. I've already mentioned AIM, which is an independent members organisation. There is BASCA, which looks after songwriters. The Musicians Union, which tends to cover session musicians, but also some featured artists as well. The Music Producers Guild, the membership is producers, sound engineers and so on for records. PRS for Music, a collecting society for songwriters. Featured Artists Coalition, they cover the featured artists, the main artist on an album. PPL, which is the collecting society for sound recordings. The live music sector, the Managers Federation, and the publishers who represent the large publishing companies that represent songwriters. So there's a lot of organisations in the mix in the UK, and it'll be the same here in Croatia. There's quite a lot of elements. And I think some people outside of music have taken that to unfairly to say there's complexity. I think we in it understand it completely. There are different interests, just as there are in the value chain of any other production, of any other thing that comes to market. And we both work together very closely on issues of common ground, like the Article 13 issue, but we also, of course, have our differences because we're representing different sectors and different interests in the music sector. Let's go on to the BPI then. And I think the first thing I would say is we promote British music. So we are sort of articulating the success of British music and keeping the main stories on the media, making sure we articulate our messages and get across our point of view. Like, you know, these are the sort of areas we tend to get involved in, the achievements of British music industry leadership, trying to get across the importance of our members' investment at the early stages of an artist's career in order to go on for that global success that turns into the kind of wider income and activity of the music industry. So I think what we would say is that record companies are early stage finance, managers do this as well, and publishers do it, but it is a record company that gives the big upfront investment to get an artist to market, and we want to get across the importance of that in the whole music ecology. We have, did I flip past one there? As I say, we organise the Brit Awards. It's the most watched music awards show in the UK. We have about 7-8 million viewers. It's live, it's streamed around the world on YouTube. It's raised over £20 million for charity, and we also run the Classic Brit Awards at the Royal Albert Hall. It's a really big and important date in the UK industry and entertainment calendar, and obviously, as you've seen, we have global stars, British stars, and it's still a television moment in the UK. It's something that people will wait and anticipate and want to see, and it's an amazing thing to be involved in, even in the kind of small, shallow way I am, working on invitations and industry guests, because it's so kind of all-consuming for our organisation. It takes several months to really properly put the show on, and we start planning it from the day after the last show finished. But the important thing for us is that it gives money to an organisation called the Brit Trust. And the Brit Trust is our charitable wing, and the Brit Trust funds projects for young people and education, mainly, is its focus. We have two main charities. One is the Brit School. The Brit School's a school for 14 to 19-year-olds that we set up in the UK. Actually, the initial investment came from a gig at Nebworth, which is unusual for a school. And it teaches the core curriculum to children for up until 16, so the same as any other state school in the UK, what we call GCSEs, the standard 16-year-old qualification. But it also focuses on the performing arts and musical theatre, a lot of backstage technical work, lighting, sound engineering, and it's been an amazing success over the 25 years. 26 years now that we've been involved in it. And we help fund every year through the Brit Awards the capital investment needed in the school. It's a state school. It's a free to go there. It's unique. It's the only one of its kind in the UK. But it's had an extraordinary track record, particularly in recent years, where we've had Adele, Amy Winehouse, Jessie J, Tom Hollander, who was Spider-Man came from it, Chris Jumbo, who's in The Good Wife. So we were getting a kind of, it's not just music, but also acting, but we are getting an incredible run of successes. And just, with Amy Winehouse and Adele alone, we've had two of the biggest selling performing artists of the past 10 years come out of that school. So we're very proud of it. And we're also trying to do the same with a new project up in the north of England in Manchester. It also funds Nordoff Robbins, which is a music therapy charity, and a number of other charities which tend to cycle every year. So the Brit Awards isn't just for us a show, it's part of the music industry's contribution to the UK and UK society. The Mercury Prize is, I suppose, at the more kind of critics end of the spectrum. Internally we call the Brit Awards the pop show, because it's just a pop music show. The Mercury Prize is more a kind of a critically acclaimed album recognition. And some of these albums have not sold in massive numbers, but they are a great piece of work. And we shortlist 12 albums for the prize, and the winner is announced at the ceremony. The winner this year was Wolf Alice, who we also funded through the Music Export Growth Scheme, which I'll talk to you about in a second. So coming on to the work that I mainly do, the working with government and all the standard things that people who work with government do, trying to influence them to ensure that there is a better atmosphere for investment for our companies, that there is a good standard of copyright, that we are able to protect our rights because that protects our investment, and ensure that there is a balance in particular between the sum of the tech sector. I won't say the tech sector because there's only one or two players in the tech sector that do this, but there's a balance between some of the tech sector and the rest of the content and creative industries ecosystem, because we need to get paid for our music in order to be able to make it, in order to be able to invest in the next generation. It takes about, IFPI, our international organization, estimated, it takes between $500,000 and $2 million to get an artist to market internationally, globally. So that's the kind of level of investment you need in an artist to be able to take them to every territory in the world, make sure that they are being promoted, that they are getting the main opportunities, getting on the platforms and pushing their music. So that's an enormous amount of investment, and we have to protect that investment as far as possible. And the way that we protect it is through copyright. And copyright is a legal fiction. Our business exists because several hundred years ago in England, they decided to create this concept of copyright. And that is the most important part of our business. It's what gives us our income. And every country that has a strong copyright regime is a country that's an opportunity for music. We've had a few interesting initiatives in the UK recently. One is what we call the Creative Industries Sector Deal. So the government announced a number of sector deals looking at major sectors of the economy. The creative industries for the UK was one of those. And that's because it is the fastest growing part of the UK economy. It has 1 in 10 jobs in the UK are in the creative economy. It's growing. Those jobs are growing at 5% a year, which is faster than the rest of the economy. And it's an economy that's worth now over £90 billion, the UK. So the creative industries, I think, went from being something that was a pleasant part of our cultural DNA for government to something that actually they focus on now as a really important part of our economy, our exports, our growth, as well as what it is to be British. And I couldn't tell you why we got to be so good at this, but it just so happens that we are one of the only 2 countries in the world really to be a big net exporter of music. And it seems to be something that we can continue to do year after year. So the sector deal focused on a number of things that we have particular interest in: access to finance, skills, those sorts of questions. But we're also looking at these problems of the interaction between online and creative content. We had what we call a roundtable on search last year, where we sat down with the government and Google and Bing and tried to tackle the problem of the listing of illegal content at the top of search engines. And this was a really good success. Google changed its algorithm a couple of times. They made another tweak to its autocorrect, things that they then did around the world that have reduced the possibility of illegal sites getting to the top of listings in search. And this is not only a really important thing for us, because we've sent Google over 400 million delisting notices to take down content from Google search. It's not just that it's an enormous problem, but it also that it goes to show that the tech companies can do things when they engage and they have an incentive to. And it's really important that we understand the power that they can have over their own platforms if they choose to. And so we are taking that on into advertising on illegal sites, onto online marketplaces, the kind of Amazon, eBay, Alibaba type services, and trying to improve the protection of our rights online. Obviously, the value gap's a big part of that, and obviously, in the current climate, export, trade deals, what Brexit might look like, are all dominating British thought. In fact, as you may well imagine, the discussion of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union is kind of dominating everything that happens in the UK government at the moment and the UK Parliament, and there's not an enormous amount of energy, time, capacity to talk about all of these other issues. So it's an interesting time to be involved in politics in the UK, but not, I don't think I would recommend this as a way of raising your interest. I would find something more benign as an issue. If you, it really is difficult at the moment to get time with government to talk about our issues in detail because of the political climate. The other things I talked about, so supporting business, we have the music. So one of the things we're doing is we support legal consumption. We take cases against online websites. So we've blocked about 63 websites in the UK now, so you can't get access to those illegal websites. We also run a thing called the Get It Right from a Genuine Site initiative, and this is funded in part by government, but is a program designed to try and convince people to do the right thing, to move them from an illegal world to a legal world. We don't. It's not a sort of preachy campaign. The importance is to say you have a choice. You can choose to consume illegally, or you can choose to consume legally. If you consume legally, you're putting something back. So just think about it. And it's been incredibly successful. Of those that have seen the campaign, 1 in 4 has changed their consumption habits as a consequence. And there's an advert that runs on YouTube that you can see, but also quite a lot of videos behind it, short targeted videos. But the other thing is just a general legal objective of targeting online infringements and physical infringements as well, which is still part of our work. So, Music Export Growth Scheme is already been outlined. Grants range from £5,000 to £50,000. It's funded by the government, open to any small or medium-sized company, and there's about £2 million available during this round. So there are a number of artists there. Catfish and the Bottlemen, Wolf Alice, Young Fathers, Gets, they're breaking out internationally, and this has been an incredibly helpful little seed, and it's just small amounts of money to boost a campaign they're already doing. So it might bring an artist to Croatia that's been playing in Austria. It's that sort of marginal activity. We give a lot of support and training to our members, so we will have sessions on how to deal with YouTube, data issues, obviously the buzzwords of the moment, blockchain, virtual reality, AI, trying to keep our members ahead of the current technological cycle, and all of that is free. And we do a lot of research and insight, and I'll probably pile forward now to some of those things and show you some of the research and evidence about the UK market. We also plan a lot of trade missions, so we will take small companies to China, South Korea, the US, and a lot of that is either licensing music in country, trying to get local companies to take the license to be able to promote the music, or it's about sync, trying to get a song synced into a TV show or a film. And getting a song synced in a country can really break an artist. So it's an incredible part of the marketing of a music artist. We also half-own the official charts company in the UK, and that's still an important thing. It's still important that we have a way of publicising to the public what's up, what's down, what's in. We've had them since 1952. They're now more than 60 years old. And the official charts company markets and promotes the charts across all media platforms. And the top 40 singles chart is still broadcast on the main kind of youth channel, Radio 1, every week. And the data is still really important and vital for companies. We do certified awards, so gold, silver, bronze awards for records that have sold particular units. And that takes us to where we are on the market. So, the UK market's changed over the past 10 years. We've had a flattening off and decline of physical formats, the rise and then the fall of downloads, and then the rise in streaming, which passed downloads at the beginning of 2016 and now is the main source of industry revenue. It's about 55% of our revenues in the current 12-month period. So it's really changed the way that companies think about music promotion and marketing and artist development, because we have shifted. But it's also changed the way that we kind of focus and what the important focus is on our work for government, because we're moving from purchasing to consuming music, to kind of, it's how much we listen to it that matters, not what we've bought. And that's a really interesting shift, and it's taken some time. It takes a bit of time psychologically to get your head around the fact that an artist's income doesn't come from the first week of record sales anymore. It comes from a long tail of slowly building up streams in the UK and internationally. Record companies are still very important in investing. 25% of record company income, not profit, income, is reinvested in what we call A&R, artists and repertoire, new signings, advances, new recordings. So 25% is going into new music. That's our role as an investor, and we would say it's bigger kind of levels of investment than almost any other sector of the economy. And it also shows quite how risky this investment is, because 9 out of 10 artists will never recoup that initial investment. If we knew what the magic formula was for an artist, it would be a very different proposition, but nobody knows quite what the public will want to hear. No one quite knows what will capture the imagination. You can have a reasonably good idea of some that are really obviously outstanding, but quite often it's just there'll be 10 artists and one will find an audience, find a sound that people want to hear. If you add in marketing and promotion to that, plugging, promoting, running a campaign for launching an album or single, we're talking about 50% of income or thereabouts. So this is a very, very large part of what our companies are doing, is taking those risks, those early stage risks in an artist's career. As I said, our industry is changing, and despite the success of British artists and the growth in streaming, album sales are falling, but revenues are going back up. And it's really important to understand that the industry is changing, the mix of revenue is changing, and revenue streams are diversifying. And that takes you into the importance, again, of copyright, of owning the exclusive right to that music and be able to monetize the use of that music in whatever form it is being used. And when we're talking about YouTube, which we will do quite a lot later, our rights to be able to license on that platform is absolutely critical to our future sustainability as an industry, because it's those revenue streams that are paying for the investment that we have. And so we have this incredible growth in streaming, from ownership to access. By the end of 2012, it was 90 million audio streams. By the end of last year, it was 1.6 billion audio streams. The speed and the volume of the increase in streaming is mind-boggling, and the data that comes from that is also mind-boggling. So we might be getting close to 2 billion streams a week from Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, Google Play, and that means 30 streams for every person in the UK every week. And that kind of, just that ability to consume music all the time, anywhere you are, is a dramatic shift in the consumption of our product from 10, 20 years ago. So we have an enormous kind of growth in streaming and an enormous growth in streaming revenue as well. And this is what's driving that return to growth in the UK market. I think when I started at the BPI 7, 8 years ago, there was a slight sense that it was managed decline, that we were no longer the product. But I kind of always said, all these tech platforms, all these pieces of technology only have a value if they can listen to our music and watch video content and TV and so on, professional content. You don't buy an iPhone without music. Without music, an iPhone is a very expensive brick. It's not useful. And so the investment that we're putting into music is also fueling all of those other tech industries as well. And the growth of streaming has shown that people love the content. That's why they go to these platforms, and that's why they're using these products. But, things are changing. Compared to the same time last year, there are two sectors doing pretty well. One is vinyl records, and the other is streaming. And vinyl records is sort of an interesting success story. We now have about 50 million trade income from vinyl records. It's not just a UK phenomenon. It's growing around the world. Older and younger music fans are rediscovering the appeal of vinyl records. They're a premium product in the UK. So they're reasonably expensive, but they still have that kind of look and feel and the curation of them and the inlay and the information that goes around them that makes them a real kind of fan product. And just to put the revenues of vinyl into context, it's worth twice the amount of money that we get from YouTube. So we get 50 million from vinyl records, we get 25 million from all digital video streaming. So it's a pretty important little product. And as Paul said, we like to think we've had a pretty good run of success. It's the second largest country as a source of repertoire, as I said, and 13% of album sales in the world were British in 2017. 9 of the last 13 years we've had the biggest selling album, and 1 in 8 albums in the world. It's, and that's an incredible run of success, and we're very, very proud of it. And it's an economically very important for the UK, but it's also part of how the UK sits internationally, how we kind of project ourselves as a country. And I like to think still people will know the UK from its music and its theatre and its TV and its film. And that's the kind of open and, culturally edgy in times, but also significant country that the UK has been. This drives overseas earning, which are increasing, as you can see, one little dip in 2013, but broadly good increase in earning. Overseas earnings expected to exceed 400 million for the first time in 2017. And share varies a great deal across different countries. I'm quite sure whether I put that slide in at the end. But the UK artist share of sales has been pretty constant, around 13% for the last 5 years in the world. That year of 17%, that was the year Adele bought her last album. And just incredible how some of those artists can be. I mean, whenever I'm talking about the British music industry, whatever I say about the generality of it, you have to say that Adele and Ed Sheeran are outliers. Ed Sheeran's just a phenomenon. Ed Sheeran used to play the pub across the road from my house twice a day. He was so invested in becoming an artist. He spent so much time wanting to become an artist. And not only is he just a phenomenal seller, but he also is a phenomenal collaborator. Everyone wants to work with him because he also appears to be just a really nice guy as well. So I think the success of people like Ed Sheeran and Adele, they're outliers, but broadly, we've still managed to maintain about 13% of the market overall. And as I said, second largest music export business in the world after the USA. And here are our top 10 markets by revenue. The USA is still fantastically important. Germany, very big market, very big physical market still. France and Australia, a long way away from the UK, but still a really important part of our music sales. So those are our top 10 markets. But the incredible thing is the growth of some of the developing streaming countries. China becoming a top 10 market globally for music is a real breakthrough moment, kind of a change in that country from a country that was broadly just a pirate and counterfeit country to one that has licensed streaming services and is also producing a phenomenal amount of its own music as well. I think China is going to be really interesting. And we will, British music may never be massive in China. It may only be the Ed Sheerans and Adeles that break in there. But a very small proportion of a very, very large market is a very good deal for British companies. And that's true everywhere in the world. India, if we can get India's rights regime into a decent place, that is an incredible country. Some of these South Asian countries, Philippines, South Korea, very important. And of course, the big prize will be the growth of Africa. And I think every time you look at the potential for creativity, not just for the UK's exports, but also for those countries themselves, as they get to understand the importance of intellectual property and protecting it, and kind of reflect the fact that the people of all ages in all of those countries also love music. And that's a really big kind of deal, I think, for the future of the creative industries worldwide. But let's talk very specifically now about this issue about video streaming services, because I think we're going to go on in the next session to talk about what's happening in Europe and digital copyright. This broadly just tries to illuminate the reason why we are so exercised. This is the percentage of consumption on streaming service, on different types of consumption. So physical albums, audio streaming, video streaming, digital albums, downloads, tracks. That's the percentage of the consumption. And as you remember at the start, I said we are now having to monetize consumption where we used to monetize sales. So being able to monetize consumption is critical to our industry. This is the percentage of income we get from those platforms. Physical albums, premium product, we get more in income than as a percentage of consumption. Audio streaming, slightly more. Video streaming, off the scale, out of kilter with consumption. And this is our problem. This is the value gap. Video streams accounted for 3% of industry turnover in 2016. It's pretty much all YouTube. There's a couple of others. So we're getting, as I said earlier, £25 million in income from user-generated content sites, user-uploaded sites. Half the amount that we get from sales of vinyl in the UK. And vinyl, although it's a great product, it's a niche product. Yet, the consumption on those platforms is enormous. At times, okay, YouTube slightly changed the way that it tells us how streams are being consumed. At times, the consumption of video streams are exactly the same as the consumption of audio streams in a week. People go to YouTube to listen to music. They don't go there particularly to discover music. YouTube themselves brought out a great report last year, which I would urge you all to have a look at if you're still skeptical about this issue, where they said that if YouTube didn't exist, only 19% of our users would buy premium subscription services. That would be worth, if 19% of their consumption went to premium services, as people, that'd be worth £400 million to our business. So YouTube themselves say that the value of their platform is of a magnitude of 20 lower than it should be. So this is the problem we're facing, is that you have a platform that says they don't need to be licensed on commercial terms because they have a safe harbor. It means that we have an asymmetric negotiating system. We cannot go into YouTube and say, take our music down, or give us a fair amount. And the whole of this debate is not about tech, it's not about the future development of the internet, it's not about censorship, it's about them giving us a fair amount of money for the music that they use to drive people to their site. 40% of YouTube's views are of music videos, professional music videos, music produced by our members artists. Of the top 100 YouTube videos watched of all time, last time I looked, 96 were music videos. So people are going to YouTube to listen to music. They stream it in the same way, and all of our research shows they stream it in the same way. They use an audio streaming service, they play it in the background, they're using playlists. It's a music platform, and music platforms need to get a license. YouTube cannot in any way believe that it is an accident there is so much music on its platform and it's such an important part of their revenues. And I think that we need to get into a world that understands that where music is an important part of the business, they need to pay a fair commercial rate, as with all the other platforms. I think there are a lot of other issues as well that are coming up that are important, and platforms need to take a greater responsibility broadly. They must take a greater duty of care. And I think there is a slight shift now in the belief amongst policymakers that actually these companies are very big, they can do things, and they are not the only way for the internet to develop and digital services to develop. There is an alternative, and those alternatives can be built on paying fair amounts for music. If we look at the difference in per user payments between Spotify and YouTube, you'll see that YouTube paid out approximately 8% of its revenues to rights holders. And we think that Spotify pays about 70%. When iTunes was set up, when the iPod was first launched, Apple wanted to do a deal with the music industry, and they've always recognized it's an important part. And we think that Google in particular, and they are, I think, separate to a lot of the tech sector on this, because Spotify's tech, Apple's tech, and so on. Google has specifically decided not to want to license on fair terms, and now is running a very aggressive campaign, including emailing all subscribers to Apple Music to say oppose Article 13. It always upsets me slightly, because I think all the money they're spending on that campaign is actually our members' money that they haven't paid in decent license fees. Anyway, we will have that discussion next. I think there are another set of things in the European debate that are interesting. I think transparency has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. The amount of data that is available in real time to artists and managers about their sales is just incredible. Our majors have portals whereby an artist can go in real time and see how many, Ed Sheeran can see how many streams on Spotify on the free tier of Shape of You in Australia this week. It's that kind of level of granular. In fact, in some ways, it's just too much data to deal with. But it's an incredible change. So I don't think we have anything particularly to fear from transparency. I think on remuneration, there is a healthy debate about the future. But one thing that's important to say, I think there's been times when session musicians that are paid for additional revenue, additional remuneration for radio streams, have worried that streaming will cannibalize that income, basically, that people will move from radio to streaming. But the income that has come from public performance and broadcasting has been going up steadily over the years, and still it's a growing source of revenue for musicians. So I think there are a wider set of things in that package of merit, but obviously we are focused very much on the principle that if you run a music service, get a license. And with that, I have a few minutes for questions, if anyone's got anything they want to ask. I can't see particularly myself, though. Any questions at all? If not, then we will... Yes.
Just a quick question. How do you see the future of paid music streaming platforms? Hi. How do you see the future of paid music streaming platforms regarding the music playlist curation and the fact that some people consider it to be manipulated by which song is in which position, which artist, etc.? Thank you.
All of our members are very concerned about the idea that there is manipulation. I think our investigation has shown so far that we don't believe that there is, particularly Spotify, Apple Music have very good procedures in place to try and deal with it. Obviously, it's a concern, just as in the old days, plugging of records had its darker elements. On playlisting specifically, I think we were concerned whether independent artists were getting the same prominence as majors. We represent both, so we have to tread a very fine line, but we did a lot of research into this, and actually our independent members are really happy with it. They actually think that the way that playlisting works and the way that you can find your niche as a consumer means that their music's getting a really good hearing because people go to their playlists. They don't necessarily have to go to the New Music Friday or the main playlist. They can go to the Independent. They can go to the Discover Weekly. And I think that Discover Weekly is a fantastic product. The ability to kind of be gently taken to music that you wouldn't necessarily go to is a really good way of doing it. The really interesting things from playlisting are the in-country marketing of an artist. Because there are some countries where a company like Spotify won't have a playlisting team. They might have one person. And they're doing these either regionally or globally. And that's a real challenge for artists that might particularly appeal in certain territories. Or for the territories themselves, making sure they can compete. We're all concerned in a world of global playlisting that US consumption is so big that it drowns out the streams of other countries. But again, at the moment, we're not seeing that. At the moment, we think the playlisting has broadly worked because it can be consumer-driven and it can be taste-driven. But it's not something we're complacent about at all. I think on all these matters, we keep them strongly under review. You know, the videos of unusual streaming factories in countries are concerned. Spotify, Apple Music tell us that they can spot those a mile off and take them down. So we think at the moment that both the manipulation of streams and the manipulation of playlists doesn't seem to be working. Anything else? Yep, someone back there.
Hello.
Hi.
What are your thoughts on Spotify allowing artists direct uploads of their music and also Apple Music having direct deals with the artists? And how will this affect the record music business?
I mean, I think as long as it's done on a fair basis and they're not favouring their artists over other members' artists, I mean, it's part of the ecology. I don't think we can hold on to one model and say that that's the best. We would still say, if you want global success, you tend to come to a record company eventually. Taylor Swift this week signed with Universal Music because that was the best thing for her next stage of her career. Although, you know, interestingly, she keeps control of her master recordings in rather than the record company owning the master recordings. But the interesting thing about that and the Spotify uploading and Apple uploading and direct signings is there's just a really healthy competitive market out there for how you want to run your own career. You can do it yourself. You can get a record company. You can do a deal that's licensing. Those are all different models that have grown up. And our members are making those changes too. The Universal Music Taylor Swift deal shows that there's no one type of record company deal anymore. They are all changing as well. I think there's, you know, some of the membership artist services labels are really interesting. Cobalt in the UK, really growing fast. That tends to be for artists that have had a few years of success. They know they're always going to sell 10,000, 15,000 album equivalents. They know their audience. Then, you know, they're kind of plateaued, if you like. So they'll put out their record themselves. They'll hold their rights. They'll go into a marketing deal with Cobalt. They'll do their distribution, but they'll have a different kind of deal than they would on a major record label where they're getting an advance and a royalty. So, I say, the only thing I would slightly keep my eye on is whether they favour their own artists, and that would be a big problem. But otherwise, it's part of the mix. Hopefully they'll join the BPI as well if they're going to become record labels, but that's a different question. Yep.
Hi, Branimir from the Croatian Phonographic Association.
Hi.
In your experience, what helped mostly for the users? What was the main incentive to switch on to streaming for the users, as opposed to the physical?
I mean, it's just a brilliant product. I mean, because I'm steeped in music and a little bit stuck in the mud, I wasn't interested in going onto a streaming service because I didn't like the idea. I didn't want to listen in that way. And I simply didn't understand it. And when someone showed it to me, I thought, okay, I'm getting that. Because it is the ability to listen to the entire history of recorded music on the go, at the touch of a button, to download it and put it on your phone so I can hear it when I'm underground, is it's just an incredible proposition. And when I finally had that moment of epiphany, and I started saying the same thing to my friends, and they didn't know it. And so once you understand this is, we're talking 7-8 years ago, once you understand the service, I think, if I had been the kid I was and able to listen to everything all the time, I mean, I wouldn't have left my house, I wouldn't have left my bedroom, but it's an experience that is unbelievable. And we have it in the music industry in a way that no other creative industry has it. You get everything, pretty much everything. And I was having a conversation with a friend a couple of days ago about Stereolab. I realized I'd never listened to Stereolab. I just listened to it then. I was on a train. I thought, I'll listen to some stereo. And that experience, I think, is so powerful, so user-centric, so intuitive, that people look at it and think that's worth £10, as it is in the UK, a month of my money, £15 for a family. And once you get onto that, or if you get on a family subscription, what's the point in going to a terrible pirate service? And I think once that's a normal behaviour, I think it's such a good experience for everybody. I think I still get some physical. I've still got a turntable in my lounge, so I still do buy some physical records. But the dominant way of listening is so good now that I think that it's easy to see why every country that takes it up will take it up. Okay, I'm being given the "it's time for coffee" sign, which is good. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.